My fiancé's one last crazy night. I, 30M, and my ex-fiancé, 28F, met 3 years ago. We knew each other from friends and had some peripheral interactions, but didn't get to know each other until 2019, just before the lockdown. Julie and I had been dating for a few months when the pandemic hit. She was about to renew her lease when she was affected by a layoff. Like a good boyfriend, I invited her to move into my house. I purchased the house about 4 years earlier after leaving the service. Using the VA home loan and money donated by my parents allowed me to buy a small house in a nice area that needed some TLC. I worked hard on renovations for the last few years. Julie was excited about this next step in our relationship and moved in. We spent the rest of COVID together, and our life was about as ideal as possible. We did some solo camping and beach trips, being overly careful. In late 2021, I proposed to Julie, and she accepted. COVID was winding down as we got into 2022, and Julie went into overdrive planning the wedding. I have a very good tech job and had no actual bills other than my mortgage. With my blessing, Julie stayed unemployed to focus on our home and the wedding. As the wedding date approached, Julie's best friend Sophia started planning the bachelorette party. Sophia was a bit wilder, so I asked Julie to please be the adult during this and make sure that Sophia didn't go overboard. Julie assured me that she'd keep Sophia on a leash. Julie dressed up the night of the bachelorette party, was picked up by Sophia and a few other friends, and headed out for whatever festivities they had planned. Ultimately, they would find their way back to Sophia's place to chill out and have some girl time. Julie promised to be home that night, so I headed to my best friend's house. I had already had a bachelor party at a local strip club that Julie knew about. She insisted that it was okay as long as there was no touching. Besides a light hangover the next day, my single life send-off was fun and uneventful. John, my best friend, and I would kick back and watch a movie while the girls were out. His wife Amy was invited to the bachelorette party and promised to keep us in the loop. Amy sent updates to John every half hour to let him know everything was okay. Around midnight, she texted that Sophia had invited a couple of dancers back to her place to continue the party. Amy had warned Sophie and Julie that bringing the guys back to her house was not okay. Amy said Sophia blew her off, saying things like she should leave if she weren't comfortable. Amy said she specifically told Julie this was wrong and outside of our agreement. Julie told her it wasn't a big deal and wouldn't get out of hand. Amy sent another text to John saying that Sophia had taken her outside to talk to her, then refused to let her back into the house because she was interfering with everyone having fun. John and I got into his car and drove to Sophia's house to find Amy in the front yard. John went to talk to Amy, and I walked up to the front door, and we could hear music. I'd been texting Julie without a response. I knocked hard on the door, and nobody answered. I went around the house to check the sliding door. It was unlocked, so I slid it open and stepped into the house. As soon as I entered the kitchen, I saw one of Julie's friends on her knees with a guy who wasn't her husband, giving him head. She looked up at me and jumped away from the guy. There were also sounds of intimacy coming from upstairs by the muffled screaming. A distinctive clapping sound came from the next room, accompanied by a familiar moaning. I walked past Julie's friend and entered the front room. Julie was lying on her back, with a guy on top of her. The clapping sound was from the guy pounding away on my fiancé. Her eyes were closed, with her legs wrapped around his hips. Without saying anything, I pulled out my phone and started recording. I noticed there was another girl unclothed, passed out on the couch next to a guy watching the show going on in front of him. As I stood recording, John entered the room behind me with Amy coming from the back door. John's mouth dropped open and he yelled, "What the f—" Amy screamed and ran forward, attacking the guy riding Julie. This guy disengaged from Julie and stood up, trying to fight off Amy. Julie was trying to cover herself with her hands, stammering something to Amy, but her eyes finally caught John and I standing there recording her treachery. Sophia came running downstairs when she heard Amy screaming. She came to a stop as she found us standing in her front room. She was also naked and started yelling at us to get out of her house. Julie had stood up from the floor and stared at me, with her mouth just opening and closing without making a noise. The two naked guys started to apologize and grabbed their clothes, then headed to the kitchen to get dressed. John grabbed Amy and had to bear hug her to keep her from going after Sophia. Julie and I stood about 10 feet apart, looking at each other. None of the guys I'd seen so far looked like a dancer. All I could think of was the only thing Julie wore was her engagement ring. I just stood there looking at her hand. I felt so detached, like I was just part of a dream. I remember walking to the front door to leave, like I wasn't even controlling my body. I vaguely remember Sophia still screaming for us to leave her house or she'd call the police. Walking to the car, I stumbled and vaguely felt John's hand taking me by the arm. Then my world went black. I don't remember anything else until I woke up in the emergency room, dizzy with a splitting headache. I had fainted and hit my head on the curb when I landed. The doctor kept me overnight for observation since I'd been unconscious for the entire trip to the hospital. Most of the night was a blur, except for a very clear image of Julie lying on the floor with a guy between her legs. My parents were allowed into my room for a short visit the next morning. John explained to the nurse why Julie shouldn't be allowed anywhere near me. Julie was blocked from being able to see me for the duration of my hospital stay. John had also explained the situation to my parents the night before. When my mom got to the hospital, she found Julie sitting in the waiting room. Dad told me that Julie tried to talk to her, but Mom slapped her across the mouth. My mom told me she started crying and returned to her chair. My dad contacted Julie's father and explained the situation. Julie's dad was initially in denial, but my dad had put John on the phone, and he told him in detail what happened and said I had a video to prove it. My dad told him that Julie's stuff would need to leave my house in the next 2 days. They were told I'd be in the hospital for a couple more days because of the severity of my concussion. When I was finally allowed to go home, I checked out of the hospital and found Julie waiting. When she approached me, I just walked around her. Julie started bawling, and my mom turned to her and demanded that she give her the engagement ring. Julie refused and told my mom that I was the only one with the right to do that. I could hear the conversation, so I stopped, looked back at Julie, and told her to give me her ring. Julie started ugly crying, begging me to forgive her. I held out my hand, and eventually, Julie took the ring off and handed it to me. I gave it to my mom and told her to throw it away when she got home. Julie started screaming, "No!" prompting a police officer at a nearby counter to walk over and tell Julie she needed to leave. When I got to my house, her things were gone. Sophia contacted me a few days ago and tried to take responsibility for what happened. I agreed and told Sophia that if she weren't such a POS, Julie would likely not have done what she did. I could tell my comment hit home. Sophia admitted that she convinced Julie this was her last chance to have another man before getting married. She said it was customary for most women to get that last bit of excitement before marriage. John made sure the video made its way to the partners of the women at the party, including Sophia. It showed a brief shot of her screaming at us. Sophia couldn't lie her way out of why she was naked. Julie claimed she was drunk, but the woman who stood up and looked at me in the house was not blind drunk. She knew what she was doing, and it only took Sophia's prodding to get her to destroy our relationship. Julie moved into her parents' house, and I'm sure she was unhappy. My dad told me that her father was seething after John convinced him about what happened. I can't tell you how that conversation went, but her parents did apologize to me. Her mom told me she was ashamed of Julie. Julie showed up at my door and asked if we could talk a week or so after I got home. I did listen to her, holding her eyes with mine. I told her I gave her everything, to which she agreed and told me that she appreciated that. Then I told her she took everything from me that mattered. She started crying when I told her that I didn't believe she was that drunk. I flat out accused her of knowingly cheating on me while I was home waiting for her. I told her that there would never be a day that I didn't think about what I saw that night. I told her that I used to see her as the future mother of my children. I told her that I always thought of us as being forever partners. Now, all I would see is a cheater. I told her I wouldn't do that to myself. I asked her to leave and not bother me anymore. She begged me that day in what I would describe as raw emotion. She sobbed on her knees at my doorstep, holding my legs, begging to fix her mistake. I explained to her that there was no fixing what I walked in on. I closed and locked the door as she sat on my porch, crying. Julie did come clean to all of our friends that she cheated on me at the party. At least I didn't have to defend my actions. People took sides. Some stopped talking to her, and most of our shared friends just messaged me back, saying they were sorry and supported my decision. There were a few that told me I should have taken her back. I removed those people from my life. I took screenshots of the conversations and posted them in a collage on social media, tagging their partners. Yeah, I know that was petty. I've seen her around since we hung out in the same basic circle. The next spring, there was a barbecue party at a mutual friend's house that she was also invited to. We had our first hot sunny day, and quite a few people attended the event. Julie showed up with a guy while I was still very much single and not interested in dating. When Julie noticed me, she acted like the guy she was with was just a friend. It was comical that she came in on his arm and then jerked away from him when she noticed me. I could tell the guy was annoyed because she treated him like that. I ended up talking to him later in private and telling him that Julie and I had been engaged, and I'm sure she was feeling awkward. They had an argument, and he ended up leaving her at the party. Julie talked to me later and thanked me for trying to help. I told her no problem and walked away. She spent the rest of the afternoon and evening with her eyes on me. John and Amy were there and kept telling me that she was watching. Amy even went to her and offered her an olive branch with a fresh drink. They chatted a while, and Julie, at one point, looked like she was on the verge of tears again. Amy told me later that Julie had asked about me and how I was doing. Amy said she was candid with her and told her that she had hurt me and that I refused to speak about her. She also told Julie that I've never said anything negative about her. Amy told her I loved her to a fault and that someday she'd understand just how much she put me through. Julie pleaded with Amy to help her, but Amy told her she needed to let go. Amy told her that she was happy that she seemed to have moved on by the fact she was dating. Julie told Amy that she would always love me and only me. Strange way to show it. To be clear, I believe I have every right to hate Julie for what she did, but I don't. I read about how so many people dive into hating their exes. I guess I'm not wired that way. She made a choice that ruined our relationship and the love we had. She's paying for that every single day. Every time I post about my life on social media, Amy tells me Julie calls her crying, begging her to try and get me to talk to her. She sees a life that she lost and can't get over the fact she won't be in it. I only post new and unique stories. Please like and subscribe.